Hey there, if this is our first time meeting, I'm Kenny here with Jeremy, and here we try to be intentional about our faith. This is our conversation, and now you're listening to Small Talks Radio. So, is it really church if it's online?
All right, there it is. Just throw it right down. Is it church if it's online? Is it really church? This is something we actually have to deal with now. Maybe somebody will watch this in the distant future and not know that like every church is online right now, like all of them. Uh, what is Ontario still in your like code gray lockdown
No,
thing?
we're actually in lockdown right now, so for a month.
Yeah.
Everything is closed. Everything has to be either delivery or it's closed.
Yeah, so now we're having to actually deal with this, especially if you're leading a church or having to make big decisions on this type of thing. Uh, how do you maintain a community this way? In our situation, we've got a lot of college students. It's already hard enough to get them to go to anything, sometimes even Sunday mornings. But once you get that strong community, you want to hold on to it. And it's hard to say if we can actually get that done in this type of setting. Um, yeah. So does it really count? I guess what else can we do is one big question that comes up now. But I think what's more interesting though is once we get done, how many churches do you think would do better just to stay online? Is that a thing? Would it count as church if they could be meeting in person, but we stayed online just because people prefer it that way? Or I don't know. It's up to their own convenience. Would we get more people if everybody was purely online, and then there was like an in-person option, like the tables turned a little bit?
Yeah, so I was exposed to online churches for a long time, even before this. Well, maybe even almost 10 years back, where um, I guess there's a lot of mega churches that I've seen. Not like I have been to, but not like actually I wasn't a member or anything. But I've been in a lot of the times they are sitting in auditoriums with the screen, so they're not actually talking to the pastor or anything. It's just they're literally sitting in like a it can be a room or a basement or something, and everything's based on camera systems because their hall would not be able to hold the whole congregation at once. So some churches go about doing multiple services a day, like three, four, five a day, to accommodate all those people. But some churches they just have satellite campuses. Sometimes I don't know if you have heard of them, but for
Mm-hmm.
the last few years, some there were quite big ones. Like in Seattle, there was a church called Mars Hill, and there's a lot of pastors that built a lot of churches, doing satellite churches, and like for those type of churches, they have different satellite campuses, and every time, well, instead of having different time services, they may, but when they do, they have screens, and if you're at a satellite campus, you would you would have a projector, and you will watch the projector together in that church and then listen to the same sermon from church, and that's how they did it. So this isn't entirely like new for me per se, but there are a lot of criticisms because a lot of people they just watch these videos or watch these sermons online and just stay home, and they forsake or forego a lot of other church related activities, and I have seen heavy criticism on stuff like that, saying that's unchristian like because you're not being a part of the body. So, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, it comes down to like, what's the point of the church anyway? Because uh, satellite campuses are an interesting thing, and I don't think my thoughts are fully developed on those. Although it does feel like at some point, if church has expanded so much, you want it to have its own leadership. Otherwise, and they do. But the point of the satellite stuff, and even I've seen churches that are big enough to where they'll have like a separate room where they shove more of the congregation so that they can watch the same sermon from a different room. But I I don't know. It feels like at some point that's the whole point of church plants. It's not to go start something new because we didn't like all the other churches, but you start it because this one's gotten too big. We need to kind of branch out. We're gonna need to put these people in a different place, and then you train ministers to deal with that kind of thing. Um,
Well,
But
that
for
being
like,
said, but that was a limitation of technology back then, right? I'm pretty sure early church, church fathers or churchgoers, they didn't have the technology that we do in order, to do things virtually or being able to broadcast things, and they didn't have that. So maybe that's the way they grew
right.
was to break up into small churches because that's all they could have done.
So good clarification. And this is what I mean. It's going to come down to like, what do we feel like a church should actually do? And I don't care who you are. At some point, you can't keep track of everybody in the congregation. Not that you're necessarily supposed to, but when it comes to like being part of a community, if you're this kind of in and out sort of person, and you're not like connecting closely with at least some people, and well, that's what a community is. You certainly can't do that online. But in satellite churches, when you feel like your like main leadership is somewhere else and we're all this kind of like secondary group of people, what does that do to the psychology of the group? That would require some further study on its own. But my point is like it feels different to be, and we'll say we'll take some extremes. Take like a congregation of like 20 people, right? If you're part of that, you will know everybody by name. They'll know you, and there will be these little perks like accountability and the resources of the body and things like that. But just think of what the kinds of relationships that come out of that type of thing, that type of community, as opposed to like a giant, huge thing. When you've got 3,000 people, it's basically like I don't know, like your graduating class or something like that. Like nobody intends to keep track of everybody there. I would call them two fundamentally different types of community. And I don't think one really replaces the other. So that's not to say that a giant church is some evil thing that doesn't do something. It's only that it's not going to be able to do what a small church of only 20 does. It's just intrinsic to the nature of those communities.
I think
Good.
before further discussing this, we should kind of define what church we're talking about because it varies by context, right? So, what do you mean by a church, and what's the purpose of a church, or at least the one that we're talking about today, or you want to talk about today?
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, like, what is it actually going to come to? What's going to be the bottom line of church? What should it have intrinsically? I won't be able to answer this quickly. I don't think. I think we'll write books on this. I think there's like
Oh yeah,
entire like series of books on what should a church be? What's a church supposed to do? I and
but
well then
for a
we'll
lot of
just.
people, it's
Mhm.
it's 'cause for a lot of people that that haven't studied this area, even maybe churchgoers might think that is a building, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you
Okay.
don't
So
have
if
to
we want
be
to.
super, yeah, exactly, a general ballpark to see where, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the thing is, if I end up if I'm trying to like broadly describe it, I think I'll miss something. I could focus on one thing that's going to be relevant to this, though, and I do think it's going to come down to like the community itself. How do you relate to the people that are in your community? You mentioned earlier that our online church right now feels more like a Discord server, which is hilariously apt. It is like a Discord server. I mean, it's not like the benefit is that we already have relationships there. Like, I don't feel like you could start a church like this. I don't think it'd be the same. But because we've already got this group of friends, this congregation, and many of them are friends, there's something natural to it. Even if the pastor comes on and fumbles around a little bit and it feels a little bit awkward, it doesn't feel like we're doing something brand new or anything. It's just kind of like, oh, this is something we do together. This is a function of an existing set of relationships. And so, but with that said, when I'm thinking of church, this is probably the best I can do to answer your question. It's comes down to those relationships, the nature of the community itself, how people should be. It should be a group of friends ultimately. If you're meeting with church and you're having to like open the spiritual part of yourself, if you are opening that part of yourself, and being vulnerable in a lot of ways, the character of a small group, that kind of thing is really only accomplished when you actually have friends. And you can be friends with people online. You can be friends with people in giant churches and things like that. It's not to say that those can't do it, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it the same way that a small community, that a small group of people does it. there's just an intimacy that's lacking from it when you don't have to commit as much of your person to it. A giant church, you can be in and out. You can decide to invest more, and some people do. Those still tend to create different types of communities. Online stuff, you can invest a lot of yourself, but you don't really invest all of yourself because your physical person isn't there. And there's more to, your body being in a certain place than we usually give it credit for. There's just something about being in a small group where you see each other physically every week. That closeness, that intimacy, is something that the human mind just responds to. Because all things considered, no, they didn't have the technology back then to do these giant I think I lost you.
Yep.
Well, I'll keep rambling.
Okay. You went or
was it me or was it you? I don't know.
I think it's you because
okay.
it's your signal network connection being very low. It could have been both. I don't know.
Can edit that.
But it's
anyway. I don't to just wrap up what I was saying. I don't think that human nature has changed so much in the last 2,000 years that humans can now contain in their mind hundreds or thousands of relationships. I think we respond to small groups in a particular way, and you inflate it too much and you're not going to get the same kind of community. I don't think we're able to do that. It'll feel quite different.
So, and I guess I'm going to use a couple of words to describe everything what you just said, and let me know if it's accurate or relevant at least. Spiritual buddies.
Spiritual buddies. I mean, I like the idea of it. Probably, it just feels like it's going to end up being very trite. Well, I mean, what would that be? I mean, okay, so spiritual to the exclusion of all the other things. We get together and we're only spiritual together. Okay, maybe not. No, I don't like that term as much as I was expecting to. It's just not only does it downplay the idea of being spiritual with another person, it just kind of like, what would that be like?
It sounds weird.
Not have, it implies you can separate the spiritual from everything else, and that doesn't actually seem particularly spiritual to me at all.
Okay.
What else have you got? I like this.
No, that was it. I thought it would brighten up the conversation because it's kind of funny. I thought that sounded really funny, and it kind of summarized what you said. But it does to a point. It kind of it's kind of close, but not close enough in order to be a synonym of church, I guess.
Ooh, synonym to church is spiritual buddies. These are my spiritual buddies. Yeah, it's kind of like saying, "Oh, I'm hanging out with my gamer friends now, and I'm hanging out with these ones now." Yeah, I don't know if people always drew distinctions between friend groups like that. Man, that seems very problematic.
We're tribal in nature, and we like to group ourselves within certain groups and identify. I mean, that's part of our identity, right? So, if you're a jock, the high school, what do you call it? Trope, high school trope. Yeah, some people are like, there's the athletes, the jocks.
That's what I mean, though. Like, always was it always like this? Like, think like farmer, 500 years ago. Like, what would friend groups mean in like other historical contexts? I think I don't know.
I'm pretty sure people like we tend to navigate towards that throughout history too. For example, I'm not going to say socialism, but the word it's self-defining in this context, and people had tribes, and those tribes got bigger and became like cities and countries and stuff like that. But there's different classes, and I think that has similar innate what do you call it? Like human behavior.
Yeah, it's human thing.
We prefer group activities, similar to I guess wolves or something. We're not like lone.
Right. So let me clarify what I mean by that. when you say like spiritual buddies, I'm thinking like, oh, this is the group of people that I hang out with when I do these things, and here's the, like I said, the gamer buddies, or like these are it's my I don't know, ultimate frisbee group over here, and like you can have, you know, as many friend groups as you want. What I'm saying is, I don't know if those friend groups were quite as compartmentalized as they are now. Historically, I would think that you really just hang out with who's around, especially if you're in a context where the town itself is very limited. You just, you know, whoever's there is who you're
exactly. Yeah. Right. Because now you say these are my work buddies or whatever, but then, you know, back then all you had was family and then your neighbors, and that was it. Right?
Yeah.
So there was no I had to go to work at this company because what you were doing is basically what your parents were doing. So there is no what do you call it, movement within different.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, unless you're a trader or something. But yeah. So
yeah, what kind of life would that be? Because now we think of the life on the road as like, oh, you're a rock star or you're like a public speaker or something. But if you did life on the road as like a traveling musician or as a merchant,
a merchant,
a bard, you'd have it might be a very lonely life. It'd be nice to be a musician. People like music, so you go there and you're probably well received. But a merchant shows up, unless you've got really cool stuff or ties there already.
No, well, actually, it didn't need anything exotic because a lot of the trade, like, because people we have instant access to everything. We have a supermarket. People back then didn't, so they needed to trade. So they had no, like, merchants were essential. They were the supermarkets back then because they would bring things to different places.
Yeah.
Some, right?
That's Amazon for you.
Well, yeah. Now we have Amazon, but back then, like you didn't need to bring silk from the east, you know, in order to be noticed as a merchant. Because if you rolled up in town, everyone would gravitate towards you because they need.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder if there's any traveling trades that were actually particularly difficult because by the time you got there, nobody wanted you there. But that would require study that I certainly haven't done. Anyway, I do think it would be a lonely life because every time, unless you have like a route and you're used to going in that cycle, you would get there and do your job and go to the next place. Unless you had like a partner. Maybe they had partners. I don't know. I haven't looked into this stuff.
Yeah. That being said, I think no, I don't know where I saw this, but recently, like this week, I read up or saw something along the lines of like, if you were to have like, you wouldn't want to go back to like Rockefeller's time and be Rockefeller. It doesn't matter how poor you are now, because what we have now is radically different. Like, it's so much living qualities and everything is so different that even if you were the richest person on earth back then, like, you know, you wouldn't have you would not trade what you have now as a poor person for someone from like the 19th century or even before.
Yes. Like, I was just thinking about that. I don't know if you've ever heard of bashes, but they have them here in Arizona. It's basically just another big old, really well, it wasn't fancy. That's the thing. I went into Bashes. It's supposed to be just like a grocery store, but it's a brand new place. And it's just like this immaculate building inside. It's a grocery store, like fully stocked, like any other thing. You know, stacks of food, stacks of tons of stuff. And it's in a newer development, so that's why they keep it a little bit nicer. But all things considered, that is wealth to the extreme, and like anybody can go and shop there. That's just where we are now. The like amount of wealth that's just like bottom of the line these days is unreal. If you were to compare that to just like 100 years ago, it's not even close. It's like we're all royalty. And all the stuff we complain about.
No. It's actually, if you think about Amazon, it's insane because, you know, we can, for a king, many hundreds of years ago, to order want something. I want this fruit. You know, they would have to wait like 6 months to a year and a half in order for it to get delivered, but we can get it in 2 days, right, or less.
Yep.
So
and now if it takes more than 2 days, we're like, ugh,
what is this? Yeah, exactly.
Really? Yeah. Well. This is something that I hope most people come to every now and again, just to realize how incredibly wealthy we are now. I don't know how you complain about anything material like this after you've come to these realizations.
Yeah, you get a cut. Your probability of dying is like insane. just from a little cut because you don't have what do you call it? Oh, I can't remember anything. What is it
Well, we
like?
have
Bacterial, antibacterial, or what do you call that?
yeah,
Anyway, so like
Neosporin or something.
yeah, exactly. Like from infections, you just die because you cut yourself while shaving or something.
Yeah.
Oh, antibiotics.
And we're over here asking, is it still church?
Oh,
is it still church if it's online? Oh my gosh, we've just undermined the entire podcast.
Yeah, we don't even care.
Just go be with people.
Yeah, so that's the whole point. We're all spoiled. We're all like kings. We don't
Get
care
over
about
yourself.
Everything's convenience. You don't need to go to church. You can just stay home and turn on the TV. I'm like, oh, there's the pastor.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I don't know if it's to really. This is I guess kind of a heavy question for me because I don't know if it's church. I can't say that it is church and with convictions because it's because church is more than just going to service and listening to something. Because the criticisms of those online churches before all this hit was there is no community. You're not doing anything with you. There's no real interaction, and unless you're building that community, it's not really church. You're just you're not really doing
that's the fundamental part of it.
Right, but now we're forced to do it, and everyone has to do it. So, what does that make it?
Yeah. Well, all things considered, I mean, we're doing our best. The people who want to connect with other people are connecting with other people. Yeah, if the community aspect is that valuable, I still keep up with our several people in our community at least as well as I can, and then the people around here. We got churches here, stuff like that. Maybe the church gets a little bit more amorphous in that it doesn't have like a firm shape, at least not for now. But insofar as those relationships are still around, it's certainly not impossible. But boy, is it easy to slip away from the actual community, the actual love and companionship that you get from being with people.
So where do you think we'll go on from here? Even when when the lockdowns are no longer lockdowns and you're free to do what we like. This whole pandemic thing is under control, and people are free to do. So do you think? I mean, obviously, there's going to be both sides. People are going to relativate to going back to church, but I think this convenience of doing everything at home online, it's been a trend, right? It's not just church, but everything, and even companies that have businesses. Why would we need to rent this office building if everyone can just work from home?
Yeah.
Do you think church would go into that directions as well, where people just don't go to churches and just do online services because it's a lot more convenient?
What's interesting about not going someplace is that it says something about you. It says like, well, I don't really want to be there, but I'll get the thing that I'm, kind of by law supposed to get. One thing I was thinking about last week that'll be related to this is, so now we have people that'll be like they were planning on getting married and then the pandemic happened. So we do some streaming and that's still, special. That's neat. But think about this, like if you were to plan a wedding, right? And then you also include on the invitation, but if you can't make it, there'll be a Zoom option or whatever. This will be streamed. You can watch it from home. How many people would show up to that kind of thing? Like in person, you would have like close family and stuff like that. But I think it's like incentive for people to be like, oh, I don't actually have to be there. I don't have to travel across the country or across the street or whatever is the threshold of inconvenience. They're like, oh, I do support you, but I support you from my couch. There's something that feels a little slimy about that. Like if your attendance would be cut in half for your own wedding. It could be that's kind of extreme, or maybe it's not extreme enough. Maybe I'm being generous. I don't know. But it did. I mean, bottom line is it shows that nobody wants to be there, or at least only a handful of people want to be there. Versus like, I mean, how could you mitigate that? You could say something like you send all your invitations and then after everybody RSVPs. You can be like, oh, and for people who didn't go, there's a Zoom option. And then other people find out and they're like, oh, I could just watch this online at home. Okay, well, maybe we won't make it, or maybe they'll like be grumpy and they see what you're waiting and they're like, hey, why didn't you say that you were streaming this? That sounds really rude, but who knows where this could go. I don't know. This is just kind of a fun little thought experiment. With church, it's similar, just not quite as high stakes, because it's like, if they're not going to go, as long as there's online streaming available, that gives you an idea of how connected to the church they actually are. I think if based off of that principle, without really taking consideration of anything else, if I was a pastor and I was in charge of making these decisions, I probably wouldn't make this streaming thing a permanent part of the church, just because your members aren't going to be as connected. Then they're not going to want to actually be there. Maybe they like your preaching. Maybe that's all you're in for. But a good pastor's not just a preacher. That's just part of the job.
Yeah, it's more than entertainment on TV or screen.
Yeah, and
I would think so. Some people find this. They take what do you call it? This Christianity as a sort of I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. They take it to a place where I have not taken it, and I don't really understand how. But they take it as if it's. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying now. But
it could have gone a lot of different ways. What is Christianity to anybody?
Yeah, exactly. There's
that's a huge one.
I didn't want to open up a Pandora's box, so that's why I wanted to keep myself in check. But yeah. But we don't know how many. I guess if I don't know what type of pastors, or if any pastors will make that decision to no longer make online services available, so that it incentivizes people to come back to physically attend services. But it's something only time will tell, and I'm pretty sure people will try both and see where that leads to. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I still don't. I personally don't think Zoom church services.
Doesn't feel like it does. I don't think it does either.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the people that are, well, I don't know. I think the church, those who are part of the church, recognize that, and they can tell that they're not connected. You can feel it. You can feel what a church is supposed to do, and if it's not there, there's something missing. So, with
also,
that said,
wait, one more thing.
One more thing.
Yeah, just to make that to really drive in that point, like, people don't even turn on their cameras, so it's everyone's like their name on a black.
Oh yeah. So the pastor has to come and be like,
that, yeah.
"Can everybody please turn on the cameras?"
Yeah, no need to show my non-washed, non-showered thing. I
didn't even shower for church today.
Yeah, it's just like that. That's afternoon. Exactly. They don't want to make the effort.
This goes back to the importance of your body. Like, seriously, you go to church and you present yourself and you're there for it. And if you don't do that, there's part of the interaction that's actually missing. You will miss something. Part of the relationship can't be developed unless there's a physical presence. And we don't even like the physical appearance when we're online. I don't keep mine on during the service. I'm not going to stare at my phone when I could be like, put it in my pocket, make coffee, walk around, and then turn it on for the small group. Even that's pushing it for some people. Anyway, that takes us to another topic again, probably. So with all of that said, that's all the time we have for today. So until next time, have a happy new year, and we will see you on the other side.
Bye now.